Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We're all about cutting through all the noise out there and getting to what really matters and getting to it quickly. Today we're looking at something I think is really essential for anyone using AI these days.
Absolutely.
And that is how to really craft an effective prompt. A lot of times you hear people complaining that AI isn't giving them what they want. It's spitting out generic stuff. It's not very helpful. So today we're going to equip you with a real solid framework
Yeah,
for how to really get what you want out of these powerful tools.
exactly. We've all seen, AI kind of fall flat.
Yeah.
When you give it something vague,
Yeah.
you get a very vague response back.
Mm.
So the idea here is to give you a really structured approach.
Yeah.
To really think through how you're crafting the prompt
Right.
so that you can unlock really, truly useful responses. Really insightful responses from AI tools.
So we've been looking at this Power Prompt framework by Dave Gambrill, and I think this is such a brilliant way to think about it because it's so easy to just think, oh, I can just ask it anything.
Yeah.
But it's really about being intentional
Yeah.
with how you use these tools.
Being deliberate and thinking through, what is it that you really want?
Yeah.
And making sure the AI understands.
So power, it's not just a clever name.
Right.
Each one of those letters represents an actual element of a prompt that when you give it some thought, you can really elevate the quality and relevance of what you get back. So our goal today is to really break down each of these elements so you can actually put them into practice
Right.
and start to see the difference right away.
Yes.
So let's start right off with the P,
Okay.
purpose. Now this, on the surface, this seems very straightforward,
Sure.
but how often do we really think about this?
Right.
When we're firing off, requests to these AIs, we're just kind of like, I just want to know this.
Right. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up, I think, because it does seem straightforward. But, clearly defining the purpose of your prompt is what gives that AI the context it needs to be able to deliver you a really good response.
Yeah.
It's like anything, If you just start on a journey and you don't know where you're going, you could end up anywhere.
Right.
And so, especially for you as a listener, you're here because you want to understand things quickly.
Right.
And you want to cut through the noise. Well, this is the first step in doing that with AI.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that the AI understands exactly what you're looking for.
Okay, so what are the sort of ingredients, if you will, of a strong purpose statement?
Yeah, so it comes down to clarity, really.
Okay.
So, the first thing is, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
What's your objective?
Yep.
So, state that up front.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to say, I want to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The second thing is, describe the specific problem or the scenario that you're working with.
Okay.
So, you can't just say, I want to write a blog post. What is the blog post about?
Right.
And who are you writing it for? And then finally, you want to articulate the outcome that you're looking for. What do you actually want the AI to produce?
Okay.
And what should you be able to do with what the AI produces?
Okay, so Gambrill uses this example. We are creating an in-depth guide on digital marketing strategies targeted specifically for coaches and consultants
Yes.
to enhance their online visibility. So that right there, you know exactly what he's trying to get out of the AI.
Exactly. And it really is, establishing that very precise purpose right at the outset
Right.
is what signals to the AI, okay, this is what I need to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it increases the chances of right away getting a relevant and useful response.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so let's move on to the O in power.
Okay.
And this is optimized role, which sounds like you're asking the AI to put on a specific hat.
Yes, exactly. And this is one of the things I think is really powerful about this framework.
Yeah.
It's almost like you are, saying to the AI, okay, I want you to step into the shoes of, a specific kind of expert.
Right.
So that it can draw upon that domain of knowledge
Right.
to be able to provide a more nuanced response than you would get if you just asked a generic question.
So how do we effectively assign this optimized role?
Yeah.
What details should we include?
So the key here, again, is to be specific. So first define, what level of experience does this expert have?
Okay.
Is it someone who's just starting out, or are they, a real veteran? And then mention, what specific skills, what specializations, or even how many years of experience would be relevant to the task that you're asking the AI to complete.
Yeah.
And the more detail you provide, the better the AI can really tailor its perspective.
Okay. So the example is, you are a seasoned digital marketing consultant with over 20 years of experience specializing in coaching industry strategies
Yes.
and personal branding. I mean, that right there, just adding that context,
Exactly.
changes how you would expect it to respond.
And I think what's particularly interesting about this is how this can lead to insights that you might not have even anticipated.
Right.
Because by framing the prompt through the lens of a specific expert, you're essentially, encouraging the AI to maybe suggest things or consider angles that a more general approach wouldn't have uncovered.
Okay.
So it really does get to, you as a listener, you're always interested in getting different perspectives.
Yes.
And those sort of aha moments. And this is a great way to do that.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've covered purpose and optimized role.
Right.
Now we're on W, which is workflow.
Workflow.
So it sounds like we're giving the AI a strategic plan here.
Precisely. A well-defined workflow is really essential when you want to get comprehensive, logical, and practical responses from the AI.
Okay.
And especially when you're looking for clear, step-by-step guidance. It really helps to lay out a workflow for the AI to follow. And I think that gives you as the listener, a clearer understanding of how the AI is actually reasoning through things.
Right.
And what the process is that it's following to get to its output.
Okay, so how do we map this out? How do we give the AI a helpful workflow?
Yeah, so the first thing is you want to outline clear sequential steps
Okay.
that you want the AI to follow. So really emphasize, a logical progression, and you want to encourage thoroughness. Don't be afraid to ask for specific actions. Ask for examples. You can even ask the AI to justify its reasoning, each step of the way.
Yeah.
So, really think of it as guiding the AI through a specific thought process.
The example workflow that we have here includes clarifying the topic, identifying the goal, leveraging expertise, structuring clearly, enhancing readability, including examples,
Yes.
and reviewing for completeness. So that's a pretty good framework right there.
It is. It is. And by providing that structure, you're really helping the AI to avoid making assumptions.
Right.
Or skipping over essential steps, which can sometimes lead to a less considered or less well-reasoned response.
Right, so it prevents that sort of information overload.
Exactly.
By giving it a really clear path
It does.
for how it's going to generate that output.
It does.
And it respects our time as well.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Now we're on to E for expression format.
Yeah.
And this is about how we want the AI to present its insights to us, right?
Exactly. Defining the output format is really crucial for ensuring that the AI's responses are well organized, easy to read, and ultimately that they're useful for your specific needs.
Right.
Sometimes the AI will just give you a big block of text.
Right.
And it's hard to sift through that to find the real value.
Yeah.
So this is really about making sure that information is presented in a way that's clear and engaging and really useful for you.
So what kinds of formatting details should we think about specifying?
Yeah, so you can specify if you want a title, an introduction, a conclusion to kind of wrap things up. And then most importantly, I think, detail how that main body of content should be structured. So do you want it in, bullet points? Do you want it in numbered lists? Do you want paragraphs with clear subheadings?
Right.
So the more guidance that you give, the better the AI can tailor that presentation.
Okay. And the recommended structure here includes a title, an introduction, main content with subheadings, examples or case studies when relevant, and a conclusion.
Exactly.
So that's a classic way
it is
to organize information. And the example they give here, effective digital marketing for coaches.
Yes.
Talking about building a personal brand and leveraging social media. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And what's really important about this is that, a well-defined format is really going to improve your ability to read the information.
Yeah.
And to remember it.
Oh, yeah.
So again, you as a listener, you want to be able to get this information quickly, understand it thoroughly, and a good format is going to help you do that.
So it's basically, instead of getting like a big, long essay on a topic, it's like getting a bullet point list with clear headings that you can actually go back to and reference.
Exactly. It's about usability.
Okay. So that makes total sense. So we are on the final letter of the core framework, R for recipient.
Right.
And this is about, who are we tailoring this response for?
Yeah. So customizing the response for the intended audience really ensures that the information is relevant, that it's detailed appropriately, and it's just more useful for that specific person or group.
So how do we tell the AI about its recipient?
Right. So you need to clearly identify the type of audience. So are they beginners? Are they
Yeah.
intermediate learners? Are they experts? Are they business owners in a specific industry?
Right.
And then, instruct the AI to adjust its language, the level of technical detail,
Yeah.
and the overall complexity of the information accordingly.
Okay, so the example provided is, this response should be tailored for beginner-level digital marketers using clear and straightforward language.
Exactly.
So you're telling it to, not use technical jargon,
Exactly.
explain things in an accessible way.
Exactly. And that is so important, because it prevents the AI from, using overly advanced terminology
Right.
or making assumptions about what you already know.
Right.
And that, again, it aligns with how we like to do things here.
Yeah.
We want to avoid jargon. We want to make this accessible
Right.
to everyone.
And that's, that's such a valuable thing because we're all coming at this, our listeners are coming at this with different levels of expertise.
Exactly.
And you want to make sure that it's something that everybody can grab onto, okay?
Right.
So we've walked through P.O.W.E.R, purpose, optimize role, workflow, expression format, and recipient.
Yeah.
Now, there's also something here called a final instruction.
Right.
What is that?
Yeah. So the final instruction is almost like a concluding directive to the AI.
Okay.
It's prompting it to synthesize all the elements that you've defined,
Okay.
using the P.O.W.E.R framework.
Yeah.
And, it's like that final push to say, okay, now go and generate the best possible output,
Okay.
based on everything that I've told you.
So the example given here is, using the P.O.W.E.R framework, generate a detailed, structured response optimized for maximum impact. Ensure clarity, practicality, and alignment with user goals. So it's like giving it those marching orders.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder,
Yeah.
of those key considerations.
Right.
And then just to kind of, make this whole framework even easier to use, there's a handy quick reference checklist.
Okay. Yeah. Looks like.
Yeah. So it's just, a simple list. You can just run through it,
Right.
before you hit enter to submit your prompt.
Right.
So just to make sure that you've covered everything.
Okay.
So it's basically, define the purpose, assign the optimized role, provide the step-by-step workflow, clearly define the expression format,
Right.
and then identify and tailor to the recipient.
So it's a really great way to just check yourself.
Yeah.
Before you wreck yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's look at an example here, because I think this makes a lot of sense in theory, but how does it work in practice? So our source here gives an example that's focused on building an email list for small businesses using this P.O.W.E.R framework. So let's break that down.
Okay, yeah. So for purpose, they're very clear.
Okay.
That the objective is to create a comprehensive, actionable guide specifically for small business owners who want to grow their email list
Right.
in a way that's effective and sustainable.
Okay.
So it's not just about, getting any email list.
Yeah.
It's about focusing on practical strategies
Right.
that are proven.
That will work for a small business,
Exactly.
not for, some huge corporation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the optimize role, they instructed the AI to be a digital marketing expert specializing in email marketing
Okay.
with over 20 years of experience and specifically helping small businesses build those profitable email lists.
So again, very targeted.
Very targeted.
Okay.
And I think that's a key thing to remember is that, you want to be as specific as possible
Okay.
so that the AI can really draw on, the right knowledge base and the
Right.
right strategies.
Okay. And then for the workflow, the example lays out a very clear sequence of how the AI should go about generating this guide.
Right.
So first, clarify the topic,
Right.
understand the purpose,
Right.
leverage the expertise,
Yes.
and then from there, structure the content clearly, optimize for readability, provide relevant examples, and then, of course, ensure accuracy and completeness.
Exactly. So, it's really laying out that step-by-step process
Yes.
that the AI should follow.
And then for expression format,
Yes.
the prompt wants a concise, informative title,
Right.
an introduction that explains the benefits of email lists,
Yes.
a main content section that outlines actual strategies,
Right.
like lead magnets, optimizing landing pages,
Yeah.
and then relevant examples or case studies,
Yes.
and then a conclusion with takeaways and next steps.
Exactly. So it's like a blueprint, for the AI to follow.
Yeah. And then for the recipient,
Yeah.
the prompt explicitly states that this is for small business owners who have beginner to intermediate experience with digital marketing.
Yeah.
So again, very clearly defining who that recipient is.
Exactly. And using clear, actionable language,
Right,
avoiding overly technical jargon
right.
so that it's easy for that audience to understand and implement.
And then the final instruction ties it all together, right?
Yeah.
So using the P.O.W.E.R framework, generate a detailed, structured, and practical guide to help a small business owner effectively build and grow their email subscriber list.
Yeah. And so I think what's so great about this example is that it really shows, the power
Yeah.
of this structured approach
Yeah.
when you're working with AI.
Right.
It's not just about, throwing something vague out there. It's about really thinking through
Right.
each one of these components
Right.
so that you get a much better, a much more relevant and a much higher quality result.
And a result that you can actually use.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think the P.O.W.E.R framework is really more than an abstract concept. It's a real toolkit, that you can actually use to get more out of these tools. And that's really what we're all about here, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And it's about, becoming more deliberate, becoming more proactive
Right.
in how we're using these tools.
Right.
Not just reacting to them,
Right.
but actually directing them in a very
Yeah.
specific way.
So as AI becomes, even more a part of our lives, which it inevitably will,
Right.
the ability to communicate with it effectively is going to be a key skill. So I just want you to think about how you might use this
Yeah.
in your own work, in your own interactions. What are some roles that you could assign to get a different perspective?
Right.
What workflows could you define to break down a problem,
Right.
into more manageable steps?
Right.
And that leads us to, I think, a really interesting thought, which is as AI continues to evolve,
Yeah.
how will these frameworks need to adapt? How will we need to change the way we communicate with these tools? And what skills are we going to have to learn to really have a productive collaboration between us and
Yeah.
these incredibly powerful tools?
Yeah. It's an exciting time. And I think it's a time to, to really be thinking ahead
Yeah.
and to be thinking about how we can really harness this power in a responsible and effective way.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the P.O.W.E.R prompt framework. Keep thinking critically, and we'll see you next time.